Hi everyone, so it's Lily here, and today I am with the fantastic Alison McCall, who is a nail and photography pro, and she's here to give us some tips about taking photos of your nail content. So thanks for joining us, Alison.
Hello.
How are you? How's your week been?
Yeah, good, thank you. Busy, but that's how we like it.
Yeah, definitely. So try not to take up too much of your time. So I feel like we'll just get straight into the questions if that's okay with you.
Cool.
Great. So I'd love to start by asking you sort of how you got into your nail tech journey and your career so far. Sort of when did you start?
So I started. Well, I suppose I started with my photography degree that sort of led into doing nails, really. So I started off. I went to uni, did photography, absolutely loved it, but I was really super interested in content creation and doing sort of work in the studios and working with brands and stuff and doing more sort of commercial photography. But that meant I needed to work in a commercial photography studio, which from where I live, there is nothing close by. So although I enjoyed where I was working, I worked with it was called Powerhouse where I used to work, and we worked with like loads of different brands, and I assisted on some really interesting shoots, and I had a great time. But it was just a little bit of a far commute, and I've always been interested in nails. I feel like it was something that I always kind of had on the back burner that I was like, oh, I'm not sure about this, I'm not sure. And then when me and my partner first bought our house, I wanted to be somewhere that I needed a job that was going to be flexible, that I could work around the hours that I needed to work, and also something that I was going to really enjoy and I could kind of put some time into, but would work close by so that I could be close by to home, basically. So I decided to sort of have a little go and see if I would sort of dip my toe in, I suppose, as think about nails. And I started doing a little bit of mobile nails, and then I did my training. So I started off doing like my sister-in-law and a few family members, as you do, sort of like, oh, can I do your nails? Will you let me do them? Um, and sort of started. My mum has had some dire nail sets over the years. Bless her, she has had absolutely everything because you start off taking absolutely whatever you'll get, and then gradually building it up. And so after I did mobile for a while, then one of my clients who actually is still with me now, she recommended me to one of her friends who owned a salon, and she said to me, "Oh, well, do you want to come and work in a salon?" I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure." Like then I have to commit to rent, and then I'm thinking of days, and it starts to sort of progress. And then I was like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna give it a go and see how it goes." And then I sort of built from there, and then it kind of snowballed out of nowhere, and I got really into like the art side. I really enjoyed sort of playing with different things. I did a bit more training, did a bit more pedicure courses, some e-file courses, started to sort of improve my skills. And then I sort of, yeah, I found Hona as a brand, and I really, their values matched what I wanted to come from a brand, and worked with them for a little bit. I did a couple of photography things with them, and it kind of just snowballed out of control, to be honest. But I absolutely love it. And I think to stand back now, and I mean, I think it'll be coming up for my third year doing this now. And I think it's just wild, sort of, to look back and think, well, I did this. Like every day, it's a really rewarding job to have because it's something that's you've created yourself. So it's sort of you look back every day. Like I come into my room and I think, well, all of this is because of me. Like nobody else did this. It was me, and
Yeah.
then that's really super satisfying.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I mean, you've clearly always been very creative, and it feels like a very
Yes.
natural sort of next step to go into nail teching and everything. But to sort of throw back a bit more to your photography degree, so
Mhm.
sort of how have you found having sort of that photography experience has maybe helped you with some aspects of being a nail tech, would you say?
So I think definitely it's helped me push like my content online, and a different content creation has really helped then boost clientele, because I think when you have sort of the knowledge of being able to take a photo really well, and sort of what goes into taking a good photo, and the lighting and all those different things, it sort of aids like when my work started to get really good, I could get really good photos of the work, and then that was meant that my clients could see it without needing to sort of come and beam to me. So sort of it meant me my promotional skills were sort of heightened by that, because I was like, people could be able to see the work that was like top notch, and they could clearly see it, not just like sometimes when you see photos and they're just a little bit blurry, or you can't quite, they're not as readable. Whereas when you've got a photo that you're looking and thinking, wow, that's sort of a high, you can see every detail, there's nothing missing. You're not sort of, you see, you get in the whole picture basically. So that definitely helped when I was sort of picking up clients because they could see my work and I was doing a lot of practicing with different characters and different skills and stuff. And I would film stuff quite regularly. And sort of knowing how to do that definitely helped me to promote my business, which then went hand in hand, which worked really well.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how important would you say sort of posting on social media is and making sure you get those high quality photos and putting them on your feeds like as a nail tech is?
So I think really at the end of the day, your business is you are the one, you are everything, the social media manager, you are everything. So having quality pictures that people can read really easily and sort of look and think, well, actually, they look perfect. Like when you can see a photo's not really been edited too much. Some of them, when you look at a photo and you think, well, I can see the edits on that, it's not looking quite right. It gives a sort of red flag to a client of, oh, well, why has that been edited? Did it not look right in the first place? Whereas if you've got a high quality photo that looks just perfect as it is, then it really helps to sort of for clients to have a look and think, well, I want nails like that, and then you sort of creating a bond with a client through a photo that they're thinking, well, that's something I want on and sort of thing. So it gives them a clear picture of what they're going to get when they come to you. And like even like having pictures of the salon space, just it's all things to make people feel comfortable because I think when you keep creating an online presence, it gives them a clear picture of who you are and it's almost like meeting somebody for the first time, but without actually meeting them, because you're kind of giving off that vibe and people can connect to that. It's even silly things of like, like posting on stories of like different music that you like, that might connect to somebody. Or like, I have clients that I'm really into Formula One and I post things about that sometimes, and that will connect. It's all about connecting to the clients who might be sat there thinking, well, why would I get on with her? Or why would she be the right fit for me? Sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. You know what to expect, sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, do you have any, like, is there any sort of ways on like a phone, any camera settings or anything that nail techs could use to sort of give them a better chance of getting high quality photos?
So when you go into, so it's a little bit different depending on what phone, but across the board, most of the time, it's about focusing directly on your subject. So usually when you sort of open your camera app, if you tap on, it'll bring up a little like yellow or white box, and you can usually lock the focus onto your subject. So that avoids any shake, which is really helpful for sort of, obviously you're holding a phone and then that's somebody else is holding their hands. That's how blurring can affect. Um, so that kind of tapping on the screen can help. When you go into your phone, if you've got, I think it's all the pro models of iPhone, you can set up pro mode on your settings, which allows you to take like the highest quality photo possible. But it basically just means that your camera can take in as much information as possible. So it's like giving it everything, and then you can sort of condense it down to make the picture what you want, sort of thing, rather than sort of sometimes when you over zoom in, you can lose some of the information in the picture, whereas you're better off taking your camera closer than zooming in, because if you are closer, it gets all of the information rather than losing some of when you're trying to zoom in. The same with Androids, they usually have a pro mode built in. They're a little bit easier to control, funnily enough, even though I'm an iPhone user.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, but Androids are actually more or less the settings. You've got sort of ISO settings, which is sort of your lighting to make that sort of um as bright, you sort of changing the brightness of your photo and like different. I'm not sure if the aperture control is on Android or not, but there's slightly more control on Android. But it's more or less about getting sort of your sliders in the right positions and sort of once you've got it, either making a note of it. On Apple, you can save your settings so that every single time you pick up your phone, it will be exactly the settings you just used. So if you're sort of sticking with a similar backdrop and if you're using the same light bulb every time and the same backdrop every time, then once you set your settings up and you've kind of cracked that, it's going to be the same every time. So you can kind of keep that rolling, which makes it a lot easier than having to think, well, now I've got to do these settings again. It's much easier to have it because the thing is, when you take your nail pictures, really, it's a quite quick process. You've got to make it quick because I've got 3 or 4 minutes before my next client or before I need to get cleaned up for my next client. And I need to sort of take this picture and then send them on their way, sort of thing, because it's the ending of the appointment. And I think that's something else that can feel quite daunting, especially as a new tech, when you've already spent maybe 2 hours with a client. You think, now I've got to make them stand for pictures or sit down and flip pictures. And it seems like something you're like, oh, I don't want it to waste more of their time. But actually, quite often as a client, when you see your picture pop up on socials, it's like, oh, that's mine. And they might then share it, which might then lead to their sister coming to you, or their mum, or their best friend, or it definitely, like, pictures are the root, and socials are such a good tool, but it's when you know how to use it and you sort of get in that routine of having, like you say, the settings locked in the same, and things that you can control to be in the same. I've got a little photo set up so that I know my lighting's going to be the same every time, my backdrop's going to be the same, so that if I need to tweak pictures, because maybe if I need to maybe make it a little bit brighter, I can sort of, there's a little sun slider on iPhone that you can sort of slide up and down depending on what, I mean, some days it might be a bit brighter in the salon because it's sunnier. Therefore, you can drag your sun down a bit to sort of compensate for the lighting. But if you can control as much as possible, it's going to make your photo process quicker, and therefore you'll feel more confident saying, oh, well, can I just grab a quick picture? Because it won't feel like, and now I'm going to have to faff with this for ages. And sort of, it'll just sort of make the process a little bit more streamlined and a little bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good tip that once you've cracked the code, then
Yeah,
there's a lot less stress between clients and it really will be like a
absolutely.
couple of taking the pictures and they're on their
Yeah.
way.
It just becomes part of the appointment then. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's just part, everybody, like all my clients sort of stand up and go straight to the picture bit because they know that's what's
They
happening.
know the
That's you go in
routine.
there. You're going to be packed before you leave. That's what's
Yeah,
happening.
that's part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned lighting and background. So do you have any sort of tips for sort of techs wanting to get better lit photos and not sure sort of what to put in the background of pictures?
So for background, I would say keep it as clear as possible. I think sometimes when you have like sort of distracting backgrounds, some people like to have really busy backgrounds, but I personally think that that distracts from the nails. And at the end of the day, you've worked hard on the nails. You want to show them off. They are your work. They are what's going to bring in the money. So you want to show them off. So the less distracting, the better. Um, and so I tend to just, if you've got either one color, or I tend to use white mainly because you can't sort of, it's not going to clash with any of the colors that you've got on the nails, especially if you like to do sort of more arty nails. The more characters and the more things that you put on, the less you want in the background, because you want the nails to be the star of the show. I mean, I've just got, it's like a PVC piece of white paper. Well, it's not paper, it's like plasticky, but just so that it's wiped down, and it's on like a little tea stand, and it was the cheapest one that I saw from Amazon, and you do not need to spend money. You could get a piece of A3 paper and put it on the wall, but just so that you've got something that's clean and clear, or even like your background of a white table, or a black table, or sort of depending on, just something as plain as possible. And then with lighting, I think most people tend to go for either the long bar lights. They're sort of what most people use for working with because they're the brightest. Or there's a IKEA do a round a desk light that's like £13, so it's really affordable, and you can get they're called daylight bulbs. And to be honest, my preference to take pictures with is the round bulb with the in the IKEA light thing, because when you use a round bulb, you just get in like one sort of dot of light on the photo, because it sort of curves and it sort of takes in the whole nail. When you put lighting on an image, light travels in a straight line, so it's going to hit the nails however it's sort of come out of the light, if that makes sense. So if you're using a long light, you're going to have a big stripe across, which if you've worked on some kind of characters and things like that, or you've got a particularly intricate design, having like a long bar of light can often like distort the image, whereas just one sort of spot of light on the nails, I mean, this is provided they're glossy. If they're matte, you can get away with whatever you like, but provided they're sort of glossy nails, one sort of spot is usually a little bit more flattering over the nail, because you don't sort of see it as much as you do with a sort of long bar of light. So and to be honest, the bar lights tend to be more expensive anyway. So go for the cheaper option, because you'd be surprised how much you don't need to spend a fortune to get such high quality looking photos. And if you don't have any access to sort of like artificial light, getting outside and in the sunshine is one of the best forms of light. If it's a sunny day, get outside and take pictures because it's it is the most like full light you'll get. And if you can get out sort of if you can cancel the shadows out and sort of get so that the sun's coming from behind you and you're sort of taking the picture with the hand in front of you, you'll get the most bright light possible, or even near a window. If you can get near a window, that's sort of a way of doing it without spending any more money, because I know sometimes it's not reasonable to be like, oh, I'll just go out and buy all this stuff. Although it's not necessarily that expensive, you might just need the pictures to build to get those things. So even just getting out and finding like the brightest spot in the room or the brightest light, but as long as the light is behind you and the client's in front of you and you're taking this way, you'll get pretty good pictures as whatever you're sort of doing, really.
Yeah, amazing. So it's all about just making sure that the nails are the focal feature and nothing's distracting from the nails.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
I also sort of wanted to ask about sort of hand positions and how to sort of position clients' hands. I think like sometimes they could like it's hard to get it into sort of like a photogenic sort of position. So do you have any sort of tips on that?
So I tend to go because I've got a sort of flat surface to put people's hands on. I'll ask them to put their hand flat straight down, and then I will take the hand and sort of fold it for them. Because I find if you tell somebody to hold the hand like this, that makes sense in my head, but it doesn't always translate. So if you take hold of their hand and sort of fold it over, keeping the hand so that it's all sort of flat together, that way you've got all of the nails. You can see none of them are sort of like overlapping. You've not got any of like the crossed over. But I mean, it's mostly personal preference. There's also you can sort of take hold of their hand and have it so that you've got like a black glove. If you were looking for a black background and you didn't have one, or you wanted something more, say you've got some kind of bright white nails and you want a contrast so that you can make them the star of the show, you can hold them in your hand, which is also quite a nice one because it tends to give a nice black background. But it tends to be, as long as your client is comfortable, they'll be shaking the least. So if you can get them like flat on a surface and holding the hand up like this, it tends to not be much wobbling. The more you sort of have them holding the hands out, some people can do it and it's fine. But some people will give you that shake and then you'll struggle to get the photos in the like without blur. And that's when it affects the readability. Whereas if you're sort of holding them as like they're steady on sort of a flat surface, that definitely gives you the the ability to take your camera and get close up to the nails, because I think that's where the shake is only on you and your camera can hold that in basically.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good tip, I think. I also think, obviously, when you're posting these photos on social media, then there is the risk of other accounts sort of reposting your content as their own. So, do you have sort of any tips to sort of prevent this happening?
So I find that if either you can watermark with your logo or you can watermark literally with your social media handle. But the only thing I would say with watermarking is make sure you put it in a place on the hand that, while it doesn't distract from your image too much, that also it's in a place that somebody couldn't just edit it out. Because if you put it somewhere like in the bottom corner that somebody could just immediately crop, they'll just take the picture anyway. Because if they wanted to use it, they would have just cropped it out. So if you're going to watermark pictures, it's often quite good to put it down the cuticle line or down the crease of a finger so that you've sort of got your logo in there, but it's not super noticeable or like just sort of your social media handle. But it's also in a place that it's really difficult for somebody to take that picture and edit it out. They're not going to waste time on that. If they wanted to steal it, they're not going to waste their time doing that. So you will then, if it appears on somebody else's account, you're going to see, well, that's my handle. So why have they stolen my photo? And it's not just going to be like, well, is that my photo? Or have they just managed to take one that's very, very similar?
Yeah.
So definitely. I mean, you can use more or less, if you search on the App Store, like a photo collaging app, you can more or less find an app that will allow you to do it that's free and do it that way. And if you haven't sort of got Photoshop skills to edit your logo so that it's clear, just put your social media handle on there. It does the same job. You don't need to stress about thinking, oh, well, my logo's like a picture of me, or my logo's really difficult and I don't want that on there. Just your social media handle does the same thing. It still protects you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And earlier you mentioned about sort of the risk of over editing pictures. Have you got sort of any tips to make sure that you're editing maybe just the right amount and not going too much?
So I would say when you start to remove too much from photos, it's when it sort of looks really overly airbrushed. So sort of when you can see little specks of dust you can remove. Some of them have like a blemish tool. Um, Different. I know iPhone has just released it on the newer models. It's not on mine, but on the newer models, there's a blemish tool. But just tiny little edits. You sort of maybe make it a little bit brighter, or maybe pull the contrast a little bit down so that your backgrounds are a little bit darker so that your nails are standing out. But what you sort of fear doing is pushing it too much so that it looks either too contrasty or too bright, and you're looking at it thinking, well, that just doesn't look real, or too airbrushed so that it looks too perfect. You want it to read that you're looking at something that's natural. So a little touch of it's funny how much when you're editing a photo, pushing it a tiny bit brighter can allow it to just lift the photo a lot, but you could have maybe only knocked it up one or two notches and it's brought it up a lot. Same with contrasting it down. If you're wanting to pull the shadows and make them a little bit darker, you can knock them down. Or if you're using a particularly white light and your photos are reading quite blue, you can add a bit of warmth, which in iPhone you can do. There's a temperature gauge, the same as in Android. I think both of them are under warmth, I think. And if you add a touch of that, it's adding a touch of yellow back in the photo and making it a little bit better. But I think it's really about just sort of taking, not just sort of sliding the slider to the top and thinking, right, yeah, that's fine. And it's about sort of knocking it up a few and then looking at it and thinking, well, does that look the same as it does in person? Yes, it does. Well, then you're going to have the readability that sort of allows people to think, well, that looks like a perfect set of nails, but it also looks real. You don't want it to look like an airbrushed magazine, because that's not what people are looking for, because then it looks like something that somebody's not done
Yeah.
for real, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So less is more on the editing front.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So is there sort of any other tips or any advice that you'd give for nail techs at all?
To be honest, I think just give it a go. I think a lot of techs tend to fear photography and fear content creation because it seems so daunting. But I think once you've got into the hang of, I mean, often if you keep a hand position that you like, all of mine look the same on my account, because when you look at my account, you can sort of read it as, oh, right, so these are all what my kind of style is. They all look the same. And I think that helps sort of if you get one style, or even like say you've got three different positions that you know you can do, and just sort of nailing a couple to start with before you start thinking, well, I need to do seven positions so that it looks different every post. You just want consistency is key, and just giving it a go. I think it's such a daunting thing because it think like sometimes you see such high quality photos and you think, well, how have they done that? Well, probably they were in a studio with significantly better lighting, but you can recreate that a lot with sort of budget friendly things, because you don't want to be spending a fortune and then thinking, well, I've got this big camera I haven't got time to use. Like you want something that's quick and easy, but just give it a go, because it's more than likely easier than you expected it to be.
Oh, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me. It was great
Very
to
well.
talk to someone sort of has all the photography insight, but then also has like the experience on the nail front and sort of how those worlds merge.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, all your tips were so helpful. So if anyone has any questions for Alison, please pop them in the comments below, and I'm sure she won't mind answering a few of them later on.
absolutely.
And yeah, thanks again, Alison, and I hope everyone has a lovely day.